Welcome to Positive Path, a podcast ministry of Unity of San Antonio. Reverend Nina Clark, our senior minister, extends an invitation for you to join us in person on Sundays at 11 o'clock. Unity of San Antonio is a progressive spiritual community where everyone is welcome to attend and serve. We have many opportunities for you to get plugged in, including an active youth and family ministry, classes and workshops, fellowship after church, and many more fun events throughout the year. For more information, check out our website at unityofsa.org. Now, let's get into this week's message.
So my first encounter with Advent was probably when I was about six years old. A childhood friend, I was over visiting at her house, and she beckoned me over to this little table, side table in her dining room, where this brightly colored cardboard something leaned on an easel stand. And with great excitement and kind of looking at me frequently to make sure I was really paying attention, she opened one of those thin, tiny little cardboard doors and removed something wrapped in sparkly paper. And then she glanced at me one more time, opened it up, and it was chocolate. And then she popped it in her mouth. Which was fine, because I didn't really like chocolate. But I was like, what the heck is that? She told me it was an Advent calendar and that behind every door there was some kind of different special treat. Amazed, I then opened all of the doors that she had already opened and marveled at the little tiny picture in there, and then there's a little quote, and I thought it was just an amazing thing. We did not have that in my house. And so until about 10 years ago, that was pretty much all I knew about Advent, is that there was a calendar and that you've opened a door, and on a good day, my friend would share her chocolate with me. Why the Advent calendar existed, I had no idea, but I did think it was a pretty cool thing. It's not known exactly when Advent originated, although there is some evidence of that some version of it has been in place since around 480 CE. There's a letter credited to a gentleman named Bishop Perpetuus of Tours in the late 5th century who describes a pre-nativity fast in such a way, the way that he worded it in the letter, it seemed to indicate that it was not new. It had been around for a while. And then again in 567 CE, the Council of Tours refers to monks observing a pre-Christmas fast from November 11th, which was St. Martin's Day, until Christmas, which was known as the 40 days of St. Martin. And over the centuries, Advent evolved through many iterations before becoming the multifaceted season now observed across many different Christian faith traditions. Interestingly, the now familiar Advent themes of hope or faith, peace, joy, and love didn't emerge until the mid-20th century. It's thought that this change occurred because it's easy to teach, easy to remember, and, let's be honest, easy to market. Hence, Advent calendars, with not only chocolate in them, but Legos, Play-Doh, and for adults, tiny little bottles of wine. These days, many people, especially those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, think of Advent as a period where we thoughtfully and consciously use the time of increasing darkness as a time for spiritual reflection and contemplation as we prepare the way for the return of the light. And as I thought about the holiday season and how Advent evolved, I began to wonder about Santa Claus and how he came onto the scene. And so last week, I talked a little bit about how my curiosity led me to discover St. Nicholas of Myra, the man behind the myth of Santa Claus. Bishop Nicholas lived during the late 3rd and 4th centuries. Epidemics were common due to poor sanitation and rudimentary medical knowledge. And when crops failed back then, it didn't mean that grocery bills went up, it meant that people starved. And the Roman Empire at the time was experiencing major internal divisions. The vulnerable populations, widows, orphans, enslaved people, and the poor had almost no protection or social safety nets. And economically, the empire was struggling under inflation, corruption, and scarcity. Sound familiar? In short, times were tough. And while some of this isn't unique to his time, because we're certainly experiencing echoes of it now, his response was unique. He could have knocked on doors and handed out charity, or let it be known that if you showed up at his church between the hours of X and Y, that you would be gifted with money or gold coins, because that's what he was handing out at the time. And either or both of those public displays would have given himself or his church a good name. But he chose not to do that. Instead, he helped people anonymously, which was a radical countercultural act in a society where public generosity was often used to gain status and honor. His choice of anonymity was an act of humility that made his generosity truly revolutionary at the time. So much so that this story has endured for over 17 centuries, and he has become a global symbol of giving. And even as the legend has evolved across continents and cultures, its heart has remained constant, a generosity grounded in kindness. And as I thought about it more, it seemed to me that St. Nicholas was a living expression of faith and hope, which is the theme of the first Sunday of Advent. Nicholas understood God as ultimate source, and so he saw himself as a conduit rather than a benefactor. When we know that our source is infinite, we have the faith that it is inexhaustible. We can draw and draw and draw upon it, and it remains as full as when we began. Yeshua ben Yosef taught to give without fanfare. But when you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And that's from Matthew 6:3. As we mentioned last week, generosity is not a do. Generosity is a be. It is a natural expression of a consciousness that knows it is rooted in infinite source. In New Thought, which is the umbrella of teachings under which unity falls, we talk about the givingness of God. This idea that the universe, this infinite presence that we live and move in, is in a constant state of giving. Giving of life, giving of love, giving of wisdom, giving of guidance, of beauty, of creativity, of intelligence. Giving because giving is simply what the divine does. It's the nature of life to give. Charles Fillmore wrote, "Divine love is unconditional and continues to give of itself wholly and completely through any and all circumstances." Ernest Holmes, founder of religious science, wrote, "We believe in the eternal givingness of life." We tend to think of generosity as giving to others, but generosity is not the act of giving. It is the impetus for the giving. And as we said earlier, it's a be, not a do. So at its core, generosity really reflects the very nature of God. And St. Nicholas embodied this. He was being generosity. And this is one of the ways in which he expressed his faith. And by the way, St. Nicholas was also known as one who stood up for injustice. Stories of his efforts include stopping the execution of three innocent men, defending vulnerable children, confronting corrupt officials, interceding for falsely accused soldiers, and protecting the vulnerable. And these actions instilled hope in the people in his community who he served. So while St. Nicholas was known for his anonymous generosity, which ultimately led to children leaving their shoes out in hopes of being the recipient of a mysterious nighttime gift, Sinterklaas, the Dutch and Belgian evolution of St. Nicholas, gave generously by the light of day. The evolution of St. Nicholas into the folkloric Sinterklaas brought some interesting changes. Sinterklaas no longer operated anonymously. Rather, his arrival is accompanied by much fanfare. He, arrives in broad daylight on a steamboat, and these days he is greeted by crowds of people, the mayor, and this event is nationally televised. It's a big deal. Little different from throwing gold through a window in the dark of night. After disembarking, he mounts his white horse and parades through the town in a red bishop's robe and a tall white mitre. And he now has helpers called Zwarta Pieten, and forgive me if I mispronounce that, who throws treats to the crowd during the parade. Evolution has also added the big red book of names. But in its earliest form, this red book, Het Grote Boek, did not contain a list of naughty or nice children. It was actually said to hold notes about a child's behavior over the past year, but not in a punitive way. It noted the good choices that they'd made, the struggles that they had, and the places where they'd grown. And while Sinterklaas is in town, he visits schools, hospitals, and community gatherings, handing out small gifts and treats. And in Dutch tradition, he actually makes home visits, actual home visits, where he sits with the family, listens to the children, affirms their growth, and encourages kindness. When Sinterklaas meets with a child, he doesn't wag a finger or shame them. He invites them to speak honestly about their year. He listens, and he encourages them towards greater kindness and better choices. This reminds me of when I was parenting my own children. Because of my personal upbringing, I was determined to raise my own children as consciously as I could and to not use punishment as a means of gaining correct behavior. And I discovered something called natural consequences. With natural consequences, rather than grounding a child or removing a privilege in response to or as a correction for unwanted behavior, a conversation was had as to what could be done to restore the situation. And this allowed the child to learn responsibility, to feel good about correcting an error or an accident, to develop integrity, to not be afraid of admitting the mistake and to tell the truth, and perhaps make a different decision in the future. The Sinterklaas focus on fairness, truth-telling, and being a kind, encouraging presence also calls to mind school districts in California and Seattle that replaced its detention system with what they called restorative justice circles. Instead of asking, "What rule did you break?" they asked, "What harm was done, and how can you repair it?" Students who had been written off as behavior problems suddenly found themselves in a setting where their honesty mattered, their relationships mattered, their capacity to make things right mattered. And these things at those schools where this was implemented changed. Detention rates went down, and student self-esteem increased. This is the spirit that Sinterklaas carries, restorative justice based in kindness and compassion, with a focus on fairness and truth-telling, and being a kind, encouraging presence. And as I contemplated this, it occurred to me that this sort of compassionate accountability cultivates peace within the child and peace between children. The kind of peace that arises from telling the truth and knowing that they will still belong, that their actions may need some improvement, but they themselves are good. And this opens the door to a genuine self-acceptance. And so I personally feel a little twinge of sadness that in our culture, this lovely, nuanced red book of names, a book meant to see children, has devolved into a naughty or nice ledger where bad children get coal and good children get toys. In Unity, we speak often of the importance of aligning ourselves with truth, capital T truth, the truth of who we are as expressions of the divine. We return again and again to the understanding that we are inherently good, inherently capable, and inherently enough. Sinterklaas, with his gentle questioning, mirrors this spiritual expression. He invites the child, and by extension, each one of us, to remember who we really are. Not the mistakes that we made, not the harsh words we spoke, not the moment where we acted from fear rather than from love, but the deeper truth that we are always capable of choosing again. We are capable of growing, of expressing greater love and wisdom. Another custom associated with Sinterklaas is one where children write letters to him, sharing their hopes, their worries, sometimes even their confessions. And the community writes back. Whether the reply comes from a parent's loving hand, a school, the local Sinterklaas committee, or even the postal service, the message is one that encourages them, affirms them, and invites them into a deeper integrity. Imagine being a kid who gets such a letter. Imagine receiving such a letter now, even at the age we are now. I think actions like this can cultivate a more peaceful world. When we are treated with respect and care, it feels good. Our hearts are aglow, and it becomes easier for us then to treat others in the same way when it is modeled for us and we experience it. And again, I contrast that to our culture, where our children's letter to Santa is typically a list of what toys they want to find under their tree or in their stocking. And I wonder what impact it might have on our culture if we ditched the naughty or nice and encouraged a different kind of letter writing to Santa, along with an encouraging reply. What didn't get left behind as St. Nicholas evolved into Sinterklaas was the spirit of generosity. The midnight tossing of gold through the window back in the days of the Bishop of Myra slowly evolved into a practice where children left shoes by the fireplace or on the porch, with the excited knowing that in the morning they would find some sort of delightful and lovely treat inside that shoe.
Grammar lesson after
Does that count for made-up words? We also see this givingness in the lavish throwing of treats, the tradition of leaving a carrot or some hay for Sinterklaas's horse in their shoes. There is also this really fun knock and dash tradition where a neighbor, a friend, or a family member leaves either a little sack of gifts or a single package on someone's porch, then knocks loudly and runs off before they can be seen. It's kind of a playful echo of St. Nicholas's anonymous generosity. When I was reading about it, it's like people call each other, now, and then they run over and knock, knock. So after reading all about Sinterklaas, I'm left with the same feeling I get when I think about the Who's of Whoville in the movie How the Grinch Stole Christmas, all standing around on their Christmas day, even after the Grinch has stolen all of their stuff, singing their hearts out, full of love and at peace with the world. And when the Grinch heard the Who's singing, to quote from the movie, and what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And then the true meaning of Christmas came through, and the Grinch found the strength of 10 Grinches plus 2. And also mirroring the same sentiment, when the Grinch returns the gifts, he's not chastised. The Who's receive him and even let him cut the roast beast. In Sinterklaas, we see a spiritual archetype who embodies what it means to bring justice and kindness together, to hold truth and love in the same hand, to guide without shaming, and to encourage. In Unity, we say that peace begins in our own consciousness. We sing it, let peace begin with me. But it doesn't end there. It radiates outwards through our words, our actions, our compassion, our willingness to listen, and our courage to tell the truth with love. And this is how I link Sinterklaas to this second week of Advent, the week traditionally associated with peace. It's a peace that comes from restoration, not that false peace of avoidance, nor the fragile peace of pretending that everything's just hunky-dory fine, but that deeper, sturdier peace that arises when truth is told in love. Has anyone had that experience where you tell the truth and suddenly you just let go? You're not holding that thing onto that thing anymore. And when you do so, relationships have the opportunity to be restored, and kindness calls us back into harmony with one another. Sinterklaas, in the Dutch tradition, while a rampant gift giver, isn't just a gift giver. He is a guide, a moral companion, and the customs that surround him, the ones that have endured across centuries, help us to understand why he is such a powerful symbol of a just and compassionate peace. And so this week, as we contemplate the divine attribute of peace, and we want to express it in our own lives, may we remember that peace is not just a passive, yummy glow, but an active practice. It's something we choose, cultivate, protect, and extend. And we do it in small ways, through honesty, generosity, creativity, presence, tenderness, and the willingness to love enough to tell the truth. Because the peace we cultivate within becomes the peace we offer to the world.
Thank you for listening today. I want to invite you to check out our Positive Path meditations. You can take a listen anytime you need to recenter and realign. Have a wonderful day.